afternoon. I am delighted to introduce Ksenia and Nouril from the Art Students League in Manhattan, who's coming to give us a talk. Just a brief bio on Ksenia. She's the gallery director and curator at the Art Students League in New York, and she's previously worked at the Print Center Philadelphia, the Museum of Modern Art, New York, Bruce Museum Greenwich, and Zimmerli Art Museum New Brunswick. Wow. She holds a BA in Art History and Slavic Studies from NYU, and an MA and PhD in Art History from Rutgers. And I'm going to hand over to Ksenia. Thank you so much for coming. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Such an honor to be here this afternoon. I was last year celebrating in the summer with you all, and it's big shoes to fill, the first lecture back in person. So, you know, don't be shy taking reviews. I was told to keep it rather brief, to about a half hour or so. So we'll see how we go. I did bring a lot of pictures for you today, so hopefully you like to look at things. I suspect you do. I suspect some of you are artists by show of hands. Any artists in the audience? Okay, about half of you. Art lovers? I expect every hand to be up. Okay, two hands. Okay, great, wonderful. Well then, I'm here with the perfect crowd. I couldn't imagine anything better. Thank you so much, Gabby. Thank you so much to Atelier, to Paul, to Donna, everyone, Quinn, of course, for making this afternoon happen. It's really wonderful to share this with you. So, I am the gallery director and curator at the Art Students League of New York. Show of hands, anyone here heard of that place before? Okay, great. Oh, right, okay. So maybe you could give the lecture. So I'm gonna dive right in. And this is our building today on 57th Street between 7th and 8th Avenues, not just 2 blocks from Central Park, a few blocks from MoMA, truly at the epicenter of New York. The building, as you see here in full, is a historic landmark. It's on the Historic Register as of 1968. The building, this is a photo before 1940, was built in 1892 by Hardenberg, who is the same architect who built the Plaza Hotel. So it is in a French Renaissance style of architecture. It is a purpose-built building. It was built for the Art Students League. And so as you'll see in the ensuing photographs, every room, every studio was meant to be a studio. So everything about the light, the walls, the space, how it all is set up was all intentional because it was indeed purpose-built. This is a photograph right after the 1940. So you can see there's construction going on around the building. At left, there's an empty lot that you previously saw a building in. Today, in that empty lot stands the Extel Tower, which is the tallest residential tower in North America. It's also the home of Nordstrom, the large American department store. It's their headquarters in New York. So that is what you see now at left next to our building. And through all of that, our building has indeed persevered, has maintained its role as an art studio. So how did the Art Students League come to be? This is a photograph from our archives, which now reside with the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. They are the custodians of our historic archive. This photograph pictures some of our instructors around mid-century. So I won't quiz you on this because the image is quite small. But if you'll allow me to call out a few names, at the very center here is Yasukuni Yoshi, who is a very famous Japanese-American painter at mid-century. He taught Robert Rauschenberg, among many other famous artists in his own right as well. He is posed here. Paul Cadmus, another mid-century artist, well known for his paintings as well as prints, is posed here. Peggy Bacon, the sole woman artist in the photograph, was very well known as a printmaker. And you know, the Will Barnett is over here, one of the younger artists in the photograph. He went on to teach at the League for many years and lived to be over 100. So as you can see, it's really a veritable who's who of mid-century art at the Art Students League. This picture was later published here in color, and you can see the artists sort of come alive alongside of their artwork. Now, this was not our founding crop of instructors. Our school was founded nearly 150 years ago on June 2nd, 1875. So we are indeed coming up to this very big anniversary this coming year in 2025. And so this lecture is a very nice way to sort of commemorate that special anniversary as well. Our school was founded by artists, for artists, arguably, as we like to say, a birthplace of American art. We were founded when, in fact, students found the education at the National Academy, which was founded in 1825, unacceptable. So they defected from the academy and founded their own school, the Art Students League. Lemuel E. Wilmarth was the founding instructor back in 1875. And I'm going to go into him a little bit later, as he was the instructor of a very famous artist who was then an instructor of another famous artist. As you'll see, the theme of the lecture truly is the Art Students League was a place of many famous artists, who then taught many famous artists, who then taught even more famous artists. And we really pride ourselves on this lineage of generation after generation of incredible American artists. So this is our crop of instructors who are truly the heart of the institution. They make our classes happen. They teach day in and day out at our school. And this is our current crop of instructors. So we have over 100 instructors at the Art Students League who teach classes 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Saturday and Sunday. We're closed very few days throughout the year. And they also, in addition to their regular classes, which run month to month, they also teach short-term workshops. We pride ourselves as well on our accessibility. I said we run classes month to month. So from our very beginnings as a place founded by artists for artists, we did not want barriers to stand in the way of our education. We don't have any prerequisites. We don't also give degrees. People don't come to us for a bachelor's in fine arts or a master's in fine arts. People come to us at all stages of their lives and all points of their career. This is a wonderful archival photograph of some of our studios around mid-century. You see that they are drawing from the model. Drawing from life is also at the core of our educational mission. We were found in the model, much like the Atelier Flowerfield here, of the atelier method, that is, founded, primarily in Europe, in places like the Académie Julienne and the Beaux-Arts and so forth and so on, where artists paint shoulder to shoulder with the live model, the live still life, or in other cases on plein air. This is another view of our studios around mid-century. This is an early view of our studios. As you can see, going back to the mention earlier of architecture, these studios in our building are cascaded up each floor so that northern light is preserved. So just think of a cake. The building looks like a cake. Each floor is a tier on top of another tier so that all 5 floors maintain that natural north-facing light. And our studios haven't changed. So from the 1880s to 2024, they remain relatively the same. One thing we do preserve in our archives as well as our student records. So I already know there's one person in the audience who has a family member who went to the Art Students League. I encourage you, I'll leave my email at the end of the talk, to email me if you or someone you know went to the Art Students League. Their card exists. I can find it. I can tell you what class they took, when they took it, who they took it with, how long they took it for, what they paid for it. Where their locker was within the building. And I would bet you that locker is still where it was, where Barnett Newman, the very well-known American artist from mid-century, traveling from his home in the Bronx to the Art Students League in 1922, exactly where that locker is still today. This is another great card. Again, apologies for it being so small, but it's the card of Louise Nevelson, who is in fact celebrating her 125th birthday this year. She has a great story that I'll actually go back to a little bit more towards at the end of the lecture. Louise came to the League in 1922. She was born in 1899, right before the turn of the century. She really snuck it in there to claim her 19th century status. But Louise came to the League in 1922 after the birth of her child, after a period in which she felt totally devoid of creativity. And the League was her oasis. It was her freedom. It was her opportunity to build a career that she could have never dreamed of before. And in fact, in case you're not aware, Louise Nevelson did not gain appreciation for her work until around 1960. She was in her first major museum exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art, curated by Dorothy Miller in 1959. She was at the Art Students League in 1922. She was born in 1889. Math is not my forte. You can do the math. So she worked really hard and really long, but the Art Students League was always part of her story. She studied with us for over a decade on and off.
Oh my God.
This is a great shot of one of our contemporary classes. This is a comic arts and illustration class that we teach. We don't teach anything digital, but we do storyboarding and other types of animated arts with the pen and pencil. So this is just a contemporary shot. As you can see, we teach from 8 to 108, as I like to say, although I've yet to meet someone who is actually 108. But we teach as young as 8. This is a contemporary shot from one of our studios of a model. This is Sharon Sprung. Sharon Sprung is one of our instructors. She painted the second Michelle Obama portrait that hangs in the White House, the more realist portrait, in contrast to the primary portrait by Amy Sherrill, which hangs in the National Gallery. This is an abstract studio, so I don't know who here is an abstract artist. No offense to you, but we put the abstract painters on the first floor where there's very little natural light, as they mentioned. Sorry. So sorry. They rarely work from the model, as you can imagine. They rarely even set up a still life. So this is a very typical classroom on our first floor. We also have many skeletons, some, in fact, real. This is a portrait of Will Barnett, one of our very well-known printmakers who taught at the League for a number of decades and was a very well-established artist in his own right, lived to be over 100. This is him printing in our studios. This is what our printmaking studios look like today, a little different. They're definitely studios that had to advance with the time, with technology, with the environment and environmental protection and so forth. You can see here, this is a lithography studio, and we have ventilation now there for the artists. We also have our youngest studio at the League, which is welding. It's about 20 years old. This is what it looks like inside. And artists make work here from miniature to larger than life. In fact, actually, none of my colleagues are here today because we're launching on-site sculptures in Riverside Park. So 4 artists from the League, 4 welding students, have mounted large-scale, larger-than-life sculptures in Riverside North and South, and they're celebrating those unveilings today. This is a very early photograph from a sculpture studio taught by Augustin Gaudens. So I myself am not an expert in the late 19th century, early 20th century, but he definitely looms large. I think I'd be hard-pressed in New York City to walk past a park or any sort of major monument that didn't have something to do with St. Gaudens, either made by him or someone who he studied with or someone who studied with him. This is a class of his, and I want you to take note that there are many women in the class as well. Women were part of the founding group of the Art Students League. So from our very beginning, we did indeed support women artists, which is something that the National Academy and other institutions did not always do. We also encouraged women to be in life drawing classes, drawing from the model. This, of course, was very scandalous due to modesty, laws, not even just values, but true laws that did get the Art Students League in trouble at times. But we stayed true to that mission. We've also, throughout our history, been very supportive of diverse artists from diverse backgrounds. We had many artists, African American artists, Native American artists, teaching and studying at the League from some of our very early days. This is a contemporary view of a sculpture studio. So in many ways, not much has changed. Students still sculpt on these pedestals, which they roll in and out of the classroom. And this is our stone and wood carving studio. Again, this is actually in the basement, but again, through our kind of birthday cake tiered architecture, we are able to still maintain this is north-facing light in that basement studio. When I'm at the League, I always like to say, Jackson Pollock walked these halls. Georgia O'Keeffe walked these halls. And it's true. I mean, the halls have been painted and, they're up to fire code by 2024 standards and all of those great things. The heat usually works. But more or less, these are exactly the places that these artists stood. And for me, that has an incredible aura. This is a little gem we have in our basement, a vestige of our mural program. We don't teach mural painting anymore, as it's sort of fallen out of, but now back into favor. But in the 30s and 40s, we were a huge proponent of mural painting. And for better or worse, this is the only Jackson Pollock I own as the curator of the Art Students League collection, because somewhere underneath this wall, probably 10, 15, 20 layers under the painting you see is a Jackson Pollock, as he studied mural painting with Thomas Hart Benton at the Art Students League. Many artists who studied mural painting at the Art Students League went on to work for the WPA, the Works Projects Administration, and were really instrumental in making, especially New York City, the face of New York City, but also other locations throughout the United States, making the face of those locations, the murals, the mosaics, the in situ paintings, all of those were created many of those were created by a Works Progress Administration artists. We have an art store. Wow. Yeah, it's quite a nice store. Trying to give you a little tour as I go through our history here. It's very small, but it has more or less everything you need. And we also, I mentioned we teach as young as 8. We have not only classes for children, but we do support learning in public schools and also in our parks in New York City. So we do classes at the Met, as well as at Weill Cornell, from actual skeletons and cadavers. And we bring our students' work outside of our building. So outside of the League itself, we host exhibitions in Chelsea, as you see here, or the Lower East Side, all of which are really exciting art markets and art centers that bring new audiences to League artists. We host lectures, which is part of my department. We in fact hosted Frank Stella for his very last public lecture before his death this year. Here he is with Larry Poons, who is one of our instructors, an abstract painter. And we have large-scale symposia as well. This is one we hosted just a couple weeks ago. We have a library on site. Again, quite modest, but very, very informative. Lots, and the librarian told me we have 6,000 tomes in this space. I have to believe her, but I'm not sure how she does it. And the gallery. So here we get to the meat and potatoes of things. So this is not my gallery. This is what the gallery was back fact, before 1944. This, in fact, was the Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney Gallery. Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney went to the Art Students League. She also lived somewhere around here, I think. And she had a home in Manhattan and gave some of her land in the late 1800s, or her family, excuse me, at the time had given some of their land to build a part of the Art Students League. So a part of the Art Students League sits on former Vanderbilt Whitney land, and thereby our first gallery, which you see here, was named after the family. This is what it looked like. It was incredible. I've been told and sort of retold as I don't think anyone who witnessed it has been around the league for some time. This is what my gallery looks like now, which is not bad. It's a lot smaller, but it is wonderful. We have this frieze that was saved from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is in situ permanently, and then around that we curate our exhibitions. This is a look into one of our instructors' salons. So every year we do host an exhibition of our instructors, and this is some of their work from a couple years ago. This is also a continuation of that salon. This is an example of one of our curated exhibitions. In addition to those exhibitions, I curate thematic shows. I'm about to open one about women artists. It's called Women in Construction, and it looks at the way in which women artists construct literally and physically through their works. This is a show I did last fall called A League of Nations, and it looked at the immigrant experience at the League. While we are the birthplace of American art, many artists from around the world have also studied with us. I mentioned Kuniyoshi earlier, George Grosz, who lived out here on Long Island in Huntington. In fact, he would have never lived in Huntington if it weren't for the Art Students League. Our director at the time, Stuart Clonis, so it just goes to show directors are extremely important and they move mountains. Stuart Clonis, called for Grosz to come to the United States in light of World War II and in light of everything that he had seen and been through. And he came to the United States, taught at the Art Students League, initially living in Queens, then bringing his family to Huntington, and in that time created one of his most iconic series, which is called the Stickmen series. And if any of you are familiar with the Heckscher Museum, they recently exhibited that series and some additional works, including a loan from the Art Students League of a painting that Grosz made around that time as well. That exhibition closed just about a month ago. It was really, really excellent. So this show highlighted, Grosz was in the show. This is a sculpture by Marisol, a mid-century sculptor who lived between Latin America and Europe, as well as New York. And this also included work by Chaim Gross, Joseph Stella, Arshil Gorky, and others. This is what this space looked like. So I've taken you from this space today to this space at mid-century. While it wasn't our primary gallery, it was a place where we did show student work, and so you could see how that was done in the salon style, cueing you in the architecture of these windows, which you still see here today. And it was also a place where art was made. I mean, we are a building for art making, and so even the gallery is not sacred. Even exhibition spaces are not sacred. This is an image of a work by Harvey Dinnerstein. I'm going to show it to you in 3 separate ways. This is the first way I'm going to show it to you. This is the work being installed. It's a 14-foot painting. Harvey Dinnerstein is a Brooklyn-born artist. He passed away in 2022. He was a teacher at the League for a number of decades, from about the 1980s until right around the pandemic 2020. He also was a student at the League, having studied at the League himself in the mid-1940s, 1946 to be exact. So you'll also see there's a bit of a theme here. A lot of people who studied at the League often come back to the League to teach. And so Dinnerstein was a great example of that. He was a people's painter, a true realist who believed in the social power of art. So this painting is called Past and Present. And you can see it took about 4 people to hang this work, which was stretched also for the exhibition. It's such a large painting that it can't be taken in and out of our galleries without breaking it down, the stretcher and all, and rolling the painting. This is the painting in and of itself. It incorporates a lot of figures and themes from Dinnerstein's oeuvre. And this is the painting in situ, so you can sort of grasp the size and enormity, the immensity of this work, alongside of Dinnerstein's other works. We did a solo exhibition of his this past June in honor of his passing and his gift, in fact, to the Art Students League of his estate, from which these are. But delving deep into our permanent collection, I'll just spend the last 5-10 minutes or so giving you the greatest hits. I mentioned our founding by Wilmarth in 1875. He taught an artist called William Merritt Chase. This is an example of a still life by Chase from our permanent collection. It's a classic Chase. I mean, the pictures don't do it justice because this painting's being mediated by a camera, being mediated by a computer, being mediated by a screen. But I mean, it's the kind of painting where you feel like you could reach out and eat the fish, right? It is so beautiful and so very exacting. Well, he had a very famous student called Georgia O'Keeffe, and believe it or not, who would have guessed? This painting is by Georgia O'Keeffe. You know, flowers, skulls of bulls and cows, Southwest, you know, gorgeous clay, pink, blue, lilac, none of this. It's called Dead Hair and Copper Pot. And it was painted in 1908 under William Merritt Chase. And it's very much this tutelage that is also at the core of our educational mission, that students of all backgrounds, of any background, connect with an instructor. And at times they may mimic that instructor. I would say at this point, Georgia was indeed mimicking Chase, but also using that as a jumping off point into their own style, into their own interests. Who's this? Well, this is Georgia herself, painted by Eugene Spiker. Has anyone heard of Eugene Spiker? Come on, no one? Not a single one? No. Excellent. That's what I wanted to hear. So, in 1908, Spiker was all the rage. He was hot stuff. People loved him. He was young, he was a man, he was white, he was talented, he was a star. People predicted he was gonna be the next William Merritt Chase, or, you know, the like, right? And in his class was Georgia O'Keeffe. So Eugene Spiker and Georgia O'Keeffe were painting shoulder to shoulder, as you might do in your studios here. And he, in fact, painted her. Thought she actually made, in fact, a better model than an artist.
It was cute.
Unfortunately, unfortunately for Spiker, no one knows who he is, and everyone knows who Georgia O'Keeffe is. And while this is not the O'Keeffe we know, we at the League are very, very proud to have this very early work from 1908 by her. And this, you can see the recto, the front, and the verso signed by her here in the back. And she, in fact, posed with this portrait, which is also in the League collection, by the way. And it's still hung, not quite in an elaborate frame like that, but still quite hung in an elaborate frame. She posed with it on a magazine spread before. So she, I think she kind of came up on top there. So I think she was really well aware of it. Going more chronologically, we also have a very large selection of work from the late 19th, early 20th century by Frank Dumond. Dumond was an incredible anatomist, as you can see here. This is one of our most requested images by artists and researchers. They request this image to draw from this image, to study this image. But he also was very influenced by Art Nouveau, as you can see in this painting on the left, or my left, your right. Kenyon Cox was another very early kind of turn-of-the-century artist who played a role at the League. In fact, this is our original emblem, seal of the Muse, with our motto, which is inscribed here very faintly, never a day without a line. So that is our motto in Latin, which I cannot recount to you in this moment. But so Kenyon Cox was, again, not just an incredible anatomist, drawing from life at the League, but he actually played a role in the League's history. And we still use that seal today. Moving a little forward in time to the early 1900s, we have this portrait of John Sloan in the collection. John Sloan, along with people like Robert Henry, were critical in forming the Ashcan school of painting, truly like a cornerstone of American art. Sloan was known, I think I know Sloan at least for these kind of bulbous figures that have a lot of texture to his painting. He was also a printmaker. I look at this painting and I see print being, I see it very evocative, let's just say, of the printmaking process. Sloan's estate is held by the Delaware Art Museum, who has a wonderful collection of his work. This is an early drawing attributed to Robert Beverly. So if any of you are anatomists and very interested in anatomy drawing, you may know Hale for his incredible lectures delivered, I believe, at the Metropolitan Museum of Art on the art of anatomy. I believe they are available on YouTube now if you are interested, and this is an early example attributed to Hale. We have, moving forward a little bit in time in the 20th century, this portrait by Fairfield Porter, who I believe has or will receive soon a retrospective at the Parish Art Museum, also out here on Long Island. An incredible painter, incredible portraitist. This is very, again, I'm actually a very post-war contemporary historian. That's where my background in research lies, and this painting feels incredibly contemporary to me. Just his use of color, his rendering, the flatness that he's achieved in this painting. It's a very sweet portrait. We also are home to 2 out of the 3 Calders. So if you know the Calder family of Philadelphia, originally of Scotland, of course, the senior-most Calder, Alexander Milne Calder, is a very well-known sculptor. If you've been to the city of Philadelphia, he is responsible for the sculpture of Ben Franklin. Is that right, Ben Franklin? On the top of City Hall, the little person. He had a son called Alexander Sterling Calder, who was also a sculptor, also a teacher, taught at the Art Students League, among other places. This is one of his sculptures in our permanent collection. And then he had a son, arguably the most colloquial known Calder, affectionately known as Sandy Calder, but to most people, the one and only Alexander Calder. This is a very sweet drawing we have by Calder in our collection. It's of Central Park and the cityscape of Manhattan. I'd like to think perhaps he was studying at the League, took a walk maybe at lunchtime and sketched this while he was, I don't know, having a coffee or something like that. Very romantic view of New York. But Calder, as you know, is very well known for his mobiles. And this is a tapestry, so somewhat three-dimensional. But it is evocative of those kind of very brightly colored geometric mobiles that often are suspended from large museum ceilings. These are a few works by our current instructors. Frank O'Kane, he's probably the only abstract instructor I brought for you to see today. Naomi Campbell, Wendy Shalin, and Robin Smith. Robin Smith studied with Harvey Dinnerstein and several other very important realist artists at the Art Students League, and became an instructor a number of years ago, and all of these are in our permanent collection. We have about 2,600 works in our permanent collection. I mentioned Will Barnett earlier. This just shows the range, very early, from 1937 print by Barnett. Very typical of the period, Works Progress Administration period, to his really pop, iconic style, you know, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Wow.
During my time, I've been fortunate enough to acquire this Tony Smith. Tony Smith, a very, established artist in sculpture, specifically in situ outdoor sculpture. Many of his sculptures are in sculpture parks and so forth and so on. This is a maquette, so it's only about this size, and it's about 60 pounds. This maquette is in our collection as he studied, in fact, painting at the Art Students League. And so we also have a history of teaching artists things that they didn't become well known doing. So Tony Smith took a bunch of painting classes and actually learned what it meant to paint in different dimensions. And that ability to paint dimension allowed him then to sculpt in dimension. And in his interviews for the Smithsonian Archives of American Art, he in fact attributes painting, and painting at the League specifically, and the understanding of that dimensionality to his ability to make sculpture. Emilio Sanchez, this painting is very evocative of classic Emilio Sanchez architectural structure with very harsh shadow, bright colors, bold lines. He was honored by the United States Postal Service a few years ago with a series of stamps with very similar work. Norman Lewis is in our collection. Norman Lewis began teaching at the Art Students League in 1971. He's a very well-known Black artist, part of the Harlem Renaissance and various other movements within art history in New York particularly. He took over his studio from Richard Mayhew. Richard Mayhew actually passed away just about 4 days ago on the 29th of September. Richard Mayhew was 100 years old, and he taught at the League for a number of years, initially on 57th Street, as well as in Woodstock, where we had a summer campus. Mayhew was a well-known landscape painter that veered from figurative to abstract, and I had the pleasure of interviewing him a year ago. But Mayhew was instrumental in bringing Lewis to the League, actually, in fact, passed his studio on to Lewis. And that's another facet of our history. Many studios get passed on from artist to artist, either because they are friends or because they are students of one another. This is a Pearl Fine, very well-known abstract female artist represented by Mary Campbell Gallery. This was an early student work of Pearl's. Mavis Pusey, who will be the subject of a solo exhibition at the Studio Museum in Harlem next year. She is well known for painting and printmaking. This is a print in our collection. It's about 50 by 60. Very, very large print. You can't really tell from the screen. And I believe this is my last slide, so you've bared with me for a little over a half hour. Thank you very much. These are two acquisitions I made in 2024. They are perhaps the most exciting acquisitions of my career thus far. On my left, your right, is a collage by Louise Nevelson from 1982, a very late work of hers, as I mentioned earlier. She was born in 1899. She passed away in 1988. And it's a rather small collage, about 20 by 20 inches. It is three-dimensional. It's built up with wood, elements of metal, this sort of faux wood backing, and black construction paper. We acquired this year. It's our very first Nevelson, and it's very exciting because it is her 125th, and she is indeed one of our most beloved alumni. And just recently, I was able to acquire this, which it's not the greatest picture because I actually physically don't even have the work yet. It's being shipped as we speak. It is a very early Nevelson drawing from 1934 when she was a student at the League. And so as a curator, as someone who stewards a permanent collection, I think a lot about storytelling, that tells stories that tell our history, stories that tell the artist's history, stories that tell art history and world history, things about our society, things about our culture. And this is a wonderful example of that, and it shows the growth of an artist from their very early student days to their more mature style. And while not, perhaps one of her iconic sculptures, it is reminiscent of those. It allows us to bring to you, our audience, our public, a really interesting story. And so I believe that's a wrap. So thank you so much.
Yes, I do. Okay, so I studied at the Art Students League.
Amazing.
And I studied with Charles Ball.
Oh, yes.
And I'm sure that there were a few others as well in the 70s. Is
Well,
it really true that there would be a card catalog?
Yes, so this is my email, and I'd be happy to also write it down for you, or you can write it down from here, or get it from Donna in the back. So yes, so on occasion there is not a card, and I can give you some examples. So the artist Paul Tech went to the Art Students League. He spoke about it extensively. It's documented in other ways, but we do not have a card for Paul Tech. Why we don't have a card? It could very well be just like an administrative mistake and it got lost somewhere along the way. Or he could have maybe not paid for class, maybe not formally registered. Things now are pretty like we run things like a tight ship, but back in the day, you know, different administrations ran things differently. The other example is I am in the middle of a research project on the artist Joseph Delaney, and he has a card, but it's incomplete. So again, I have documented evidence that Joseph Delaney enrolled in 1931, but our card begins in 1934. What happened between 30 and 34, I don't know. But as a scholar, I believe I have enough evidence to corroborate him being at the school at an earlier date. So
It does sound really extensive and wonderful.
Yes.
And I just wanted to say that I do remember the gallery. I
Aw.
do remember the way the gallery was, and this is like leaps and bounds.
Thank
It's
you.
so beautiful. And the other thing that was so amazing about the Art Students League is it is true that at any stage that you were, that you could go there, and you could also acquire several different techniques.
Yes.
It may not have been what you wound up doing, but it became a part of you.
yes,
So that was the wonderful aspect of it. And I do also remember, and I think it was in the 70s basically, that there were just as many women as men in the classroom. So that was really wonderful to see also.
and that very much continues to this day. And I appreciate your feedback. Thank you about the gallery.
And one last thing, Charlton Heston was a model at the Art Students League.
I believe
Is that not?
it. So Charlton Heston, I mean, I'm going to believe you. I absolutely believe you. It's not a name that I often quote, but I do know a lot of contemporary famous people who study at the league. They might have played with Blockbuster. Mark Ruffalo, anyone? As well as Lucy Fry and Steve Martin has made appearances at the Art Students League and many other people. Yes, I believe our model history is also very deep. So there's one thing about famous people being students, but also models, right? So, you know, at different times in people's careers, they take different jobs, and being a model is definitely one of them.
Sure.
And it still continues like, very much to this day. I will say we have 250,000, so 250,000 student records from before 1990.
Wow.
After 1990, we have about 75,000, and those are fully digitized. So everything is digitized. Before 1990, it was handwritten. After 1990, it was fully on the computer. So we do have these two sets of records that make up our archive. And as I mentioned earlier, our photo archive and other archives are at the Smithsonian Institute of American Art in Washington, D.C.
I mean, it's wonderful. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
coming
thank
and
you.
doing this. And
Yeah.
I just can't believe how you're promoting artists as well, being in galleries in Manhattan.
Yeah,
That's
very
totally
important.
amazing. The
Yeah.
only way that I remember that we were able to exist or exhibit as women is that I joined an artist group that was all women.
Like NAWA or something.
I think it was called the New York Artist Circle.
Sure, yeah.
And there's some
Yeah.
very famous people
Yeah.
that were involved with that. And the nice thing was, if you were at the bottom rung or the middle or the top,
Yeah.
everybody contributed to each other and
Mhm.
helped each other move forward.
I love that. And I must admit, I've only been at the league for 2 years, so all of this truly is built on the back of so many people who have come before me. I'm the third curator at the Art Students League, so much of this collection work, collection cataloging has been built up by the curators before me. And we are working very hard under the current administration to make sure our students' work are. We really like to call people league artists, not even league students anymore, because that's what they are, artists. And so we try to do everything in our power to ensure that league artists are being seen.
Yes, because it was very hard at the time to exhibit as women.
It's still hard.
As women,
Yeah, it's still quite hard.
And
Yeah.
if there's 1,000 applicants to one gallery,
Yeah.
how could they go through all of that
Absolutely.
if you would have that chance to
Yeah.
even exhibit in a gallery?
I know. Any other questions? Great, in the back.
Did Red Rooms have any dealings with the?
He did. So Red Grooms, I believe, is originally from Tennessee, and he came to New York, got a room at the YMCA, and signed up for a class at the league under the GI Bill. So the GI Bill was incredibly transformative for the Art Students League, and he did take classes there. In fact, I met Red sometime last year at his gallery show, and in Marlborough Gallery, where he was showing at the time. And he spoke very fondly of his time at the league. Yes.
Also, within the longevity of these artists, you mentioned several, around 100 or so. And I was thinking that I think orchestral conductors also have a similar reputation for longevity.
I guess it's creativity.
Yeah, I was wondering if the two of them have been put together, the orchestral and the art, and perhaps they could be introduced to odd and strange and marvelous mating rituals.
Well, a couple kind of related thoughts that came into my mind as you were asking that question. So we are catty corner to Carnegie Hall, and back in 1875, or back in 1892, excuse me, when we moved into this building, we and Carnegie Hall were it on 57th Street. 57th Street was the Wild West. All the buildings and apartments and stores that in Midtown did not exist. So we have a very deep affection for Carnegie Hall, as they have been with us from the very beginning. In our building, there's a mezzanine floor that overlooks our contemporary gallery today, and I've been told that our contemporary gallery used to function as as you saw, a studio space, exhibition space, meeting place, and I've been told that there used to be musicians that played on that mezzanine, as there's a window on that mezzanine to this day that opens into the gallery. And so there was this upper gallery of musicians that would play down onto the students. And then the last thought I had was the artist Harvey Dinnerstein that I told you about, that very large 14-foot painting, revealed his interest in the trope of music, and which is very interesting to me that he would rely on the trope of music rather than the trope of art, or even the muse of art, that he would always turn to the muse of music and the trope of music in his work. And so he would paint musicians, he would paint musical instruments, and so forth and so on. So interestingly enough, yeah, music does have a very interesting thread through the lives of visual artists, but it's not particularly a subject that I focus on. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I hope you'll come and visit us next time. We'll be in Manhattan. We are free and open to the public literally every day of the week, unless it's a federal holiday. So
Maybe